I'm Scott MacQueen. I'm the head of preservation for the UCLA Film and Television Archive, and I've been spearheading the Laurel and Hardy preservation campaign that we've been running the last few years. Laurel and Hardy is perhaps, for my money, the greatest American comedy team of all time in motion pictures. They're films that have been seen and loved for 90 years at this point, and they've not survived in terribly fine condition. The Laurel and Hardy films were so popular worldwide that the original negatives were overprinted tremendously a half century ago and more, to where they wore out in many cases. Many don't even survive, and the copies that we are left with are many generations down in pictorial quality and have a lot of printed in damage and wear and losses. So our objective is to go back and find the highest existing generation in the world on each title and try to reconstitute the best possible, most authentic, most good-looking and sounding version that can be had in the 21st century. Next up, and having many of the same losses and damage, is Perfect Day, the 1929 short, which is typical of Laurel and Hardy, a simple premise. The family is going to go on a picnic, and for 18 minutes, everything that can happen to prevent the car leaving the curb in front of the house happens. We only had one of two reels of camera negatives surviving into the 21st century. That was reel one. And when it was looked at about 10 years ago, it was decomposing. And the initial 2 minutes of it had to be cut off and thrown away because they could completely rot. We then made a fine grain of the remainder of the reel, and that's what I have here in this red can. This fine grain is a master positive from which we can make a duplicate negative. But this is how the camera negative, the surviving roll, has survived for Perfect Day. It's got losses. Now, in that early talkie period, not everybody got the memo. In fact, the memo may not have been written. What was the size and shape of your movie screen? In the silent days, it was a roughly 4x3, 1.33 units wide as it was 1 unit high. The problem is when sound came in, you had competing sound systems. The one that succeeded first was Warner Brothers Sound on Disc, the Vitaphone, and that had that 133 silent image interlocked with phonograph records. But the competing system was created by Western Electric, and it was an optical soundtrack system where the sound was printed on the film alongside the picture, which meant now that the far edge of the film over here had to accommodate a soundtrack. What was the cameraman doing? He was still composing in many cases for the optical center of the silent frame. When they thought about it, they would sometimes redesign the artwork and move that over this way so the optical center would still leave the title centered and they'd extend the artwork, but they would be inconsistent. Sometimes one cameraman would shoot it and leave that correct. Other times they would cheat it over. The result being that the soundtrack copies, the movie tone Western Electric prints frequently had huge picture losses on the left-hand side of frame to where characters could disappear. And in Perfect Day, in the opening sequence, Edgar Kennedy, the uncle, is sitting on the couch. And in the surviving copies that we have of the opening minute, he's invisible. You can see his leg in the cast, he's got gout on the couch, and every now and then he bends into frame, he crosses the line and comes in, but by and large he's missing. And because that section is what's decomposed out in the camera negative, we can never get that back short of something special turning up, because we don't have that day and date work print for reel one. But nor do we have reel two of the camera negative. That didn't survive into the 21st century. What we have for that is what is labeled here by the Road Studio, the cutting pick pause. That is the work print, the picture work print. And this is the highest generation thing in the world on reel two of Perfect Day. And so this is what reel two will come back from. The difficulty is that the work print, being the editorial copy, is subject to changes at all times. And what we see in these work prints, despite the fact they're first generation, They can be dirty, they can have editorial marks, and you can even see places where during a take, they may have decided to cut after about 10 seconds, and maybe when Stan's watching the assembly, he goes, no, put back the scene where Ollie does the gesture, I like that. And so they would return the rest of the take, having lost frames where they had cut it out of the dailies. But being Roach and being, on a budget, they didn't bother to reprint it. They would just slug 2 or 3 frames of black in to cover that to maintain sync. So now, what do you do about that? The surviving alternate materials tend to date from the late 1940s, from just the post-World War II period. They're often 4th and 5th generation, made from those composite Western Electric sound elements that have lost the left edge of frame. So they're 3 to 4 generations down in quality, and they're missing the whole left edge. The only way you can come back from those is digitally. So I'm very hopeful the Perfect Day also will look like it has not looked since 1929 in its generational quality. And the sound as well is coming off original Vitaphone discs. And it even has a wonderful little throwaway piece of profanity that Uncle Edgar Kennedy tosses off when he's inconvenienced getting out of the car at one point. That has turned up in other editions, and people just quite don't hear it. We did find evidence in some of the post-war film elements where they'd made a splice there. Somebody did notice it and did try to remove the little bit of colorful language that Mr. Kennedy used. But rest assured, when we get done with it, you'll hear it clear as a bell.